ScreenAgers, welcome back to another episode of The Canon, your favorite movie podcast, the only movie podcast providing you with a watch list of the most essential movies ever made. Very excited for this one. We've got a great movie, and we've got some great guests who are going to be joining. They're returning guests. They've been on before for some pretty good episodes. They're making fun of my finger pointing, but that's okay.
Doing
Ladies and gentlemen. Oh, you're doing like a sports
NBA.
intro? Yeah.
It's coming out.
Two-time
Let's
back-to-back
go.
world champs.
Welcoming back to the Canon, a 6-foot center from Long Island, Sean Ryan.
Oh, Bunny.
Well, how tall are you?
5'11", like 3/4, you know.
A 5'11" small forward from New Jersey,
Oh.
Sean Welsh Brown.
Fireworks.
Are you?
WWE
Finish your intro. Then I have an important question, actually.
That's the intro. Sean's welcome back
Okay.
to the show. How's it
I'm
going?
in. I'm in the ring already. Good.
All right, I have a question right
Great.
away. Would you ever do Space Jam? Have you done Space Jam?
So here's the thing. I love Space Jam. Great
Yeah.
movie. There's like a set list of movies that are in the canon that have been voted
Far down the
on
list.
by a group of, well-respected writers at ScreenAge Wasteland, and Space Jam did not make it onto the list. So
Damn.
that movie unfortunately won't be a part of this podcast, but it might be, something that we talk about in another respect, in
Like
another
in its own
show.
podcast, standalone.
Yeah, a standalone
can't
Space Jam
name it.
podcast.
But
yeah.
the sports intro scene where he's like I don't know, 4 feet tall, 4'4", including the ears. Bugs Bunny. That intro scene is so good. Like
Yeah,
oh man, it's just like one of the best sports movies ever.
it's amazing. The sequel sucks,
So
but
bad.
the sequel does reference the Matrix when they're putting together the team. When they're getting, is it Speedy Gonzalez or is it the Granny? Yeah, they're getting Granny.
Granny
And
is
she's
Carrie-Ann
doing,
Moss.
yeah, she's doing the
And I
Trinity
think
introduction scene.
I think they just straight up reuse the original footage and then like slice her in.
I think they do.
I don't think it's animated except for I think
Except
they
for-
like live action.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
very Looney Tunes Space Jam thing for them to do for sure.
That is easily the best part of that movie.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is one of the more interesting roundabout intros that we've done for an episode, but that's why it's always fun having you two gents on. I think I mentioned at the top, you have both been on the show before. We've done No Country for Old Men and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So this is our trilogy of, I don't even know how to connect those movies, but a trilogy of pretty sick movies.
And Good, Bad, the Ugly. I feel like they're for some reason in my mind they're very related. Maybe because it's like a
I feel like too for
manhunt.
some
It's just
reason.
like a manhunt between like unhinged
Old,
dudes and
old
Mexicans.
salty
involved.
dudes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
They're
sweaty
both
dudes in
kind
the
of
West.
westerns, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can we call The
Definitely.
Matrix a western?
Well,
The shot of in the subway where they're about to duel
I was
is
gonna
very
say,
western.
yeah, very Western with the crack in the knuckles by their hand, by their
Yeah.
heads,
Yeah, in
Except
my head I went.
well, they do pull it again, but
That was pretty good.
Thanks.
yeah,
That was pretty
it's
good.
definitely got that vibe.
So, since you guys have been on before, and I feel like we've got a lot of movie to talk about, I feel like we'll skip through all the pleasantries and stuff. We don't have to talk about what it is that you guys do or why I'm having you on. Just everyone, listeners know these guys are big movie guys, also big video game guys. You can catch them
True.
elsewhere talking about video games and whatnot, but you can catch them here talking movies, talking The Matrix specifically. So, which is kind of video game inspired or like video game adjacent, lends itself to that medium in a lot of different ways. So I'm sure we'll be getting into that. But yeah, if you guys are ready, I think we can just freaking just go in. What do you say?
Get in
Yeah,
there, dog.
sounds good to me. Let's do it.
Cool. So to get us started, we typically like to just like open up the discussion with sort of like general thoughts about the movie and everyone's background relationship to it. Welsh, I think I kind of want to start with you on this because you mentioned, I think a few times before we started recording, that this is one of, if not your favorite movie of all time. Like every time you revisit it, it just sparks something within you. So why don't
Yeah.
you kick us off? Like when did you first watch The Matrix? Have you always loved it? And like, what does this movie mean for you?
Yeah, it's actually hard to say even when. I don't remember when I first watched it, probably pretty close to when it came out. I don't know if it was in theaters or not, but it's one of those things where it's a movie that just feels like it defines a whole part of my life and of the way I think of the world back then, like that specific kind of Y2K, 1999, like the internet, the world is shifting, all that sort of thing. And like, there's something about the vibe of it that I feel like just always really, really strongly connected with me. Like, I've always been a big tech guy. I love games, I love computers, and seeing the way it was visualized in that way of like the kind of cyberpunky sort of thing was just, I don't know, appealed to me so much as a kid. Like I didn't even really understand like deeper meanings of just the critiques of the state of the world and all that sort of thing.
Mhm.
I think that's why I like rewatching it so much is as a kid being like, oh dude, sick, like slow motion. They're like running on walls doing backflips. They're all wearing leather. That's so cool. And now I watch it and I'm like, oh my God, wait, there's like, this is about like the environment. This is about like, the economy and social rights and justice, all these sorts of things. Like I find
Yeah.
new things in it every time. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good movie.
We'll start with pretty good. We might move up along the way,
Yeah.
but I feel like
It's
that's
it's very nostalgic for me too because I remember just watching it with like my brother and like childhood friends and stuff and kind of like
mhm.
imitating it. So I
Yeah,
think like that's a part of it too. That weird kind of like makes me feel like a kid again when I watch it.
dude. Who didn't try to do the Neo like bullet dodge thing in the backyard as a kid? Yeah,
I
Oh
still
yeah,
even
try
of
if
to.
you hadn't
course.
seen it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it was everywhere. One of the probably
Uh,
one of the most parodied things of all time, maybe.
yeah, easily, especially of like the last 25 years. It's insane to think that this movie is 25 years old, which
That's messed
That
up.
is insane.
I'm
It
sure
looks
Yeah.
amazing. It really
we'll
does look
still talk about.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Like the
Mr. Banana Man,
holds up so well.
why don't you give us your thoughts about The Matrix? When did you first watch it? When did you last watch it? What are your like overall general thoughts on this movie?
The first time I watched it, it, I actually can't remember exactly like how old I was, but I was very young. Like it had to have been within the first 3 years of it being out. I'm trying to remember if it was like in '99 or like 2002. But it's funny because I do remember like the day. I remember like parts of the day of when I watched it, which like when you're
Mm,
like 7 to 10, like you really don't remember like anything. But I remember
Mhm.
yeah.
like I remember with the restaurant I was with my family before. I went to like my neighbor's older brother's house and we like watched it in his living room. Like I don't know why I remember that. So maybe that's like how much of an impact it made
Yeah,
that it like
Yeah.
gave me something to wrap like anchor those memories around. Um but yeah, no, I love this movie. I think when I watched it then, I think I was the same as Welsh. Like I just thought it was like being so young, I thought it was just like the coolest thing ever. Like it was just so it's so enticing and you're not really understanding anything outside of the action scenes. I think the only time I had rewatched it was right when before Resurrections came out during COVID.
hmm
And I watched all three of them again. And I think I at that point I got really obsessed with like what the Wachowskis were trying to do with the whole idea of like false prophecy and like
Mm,
illusion of
hmm
choice and how that like spreads through the three. So the second rewatch and every rewatch since then is definitely like it could be looked at as a positive or a negative, but I think I definitely look at it as like it's very hard for me to watch it without like constantly thinking about the bigger rabbit hole. So like I'm
Interesting.
so like it to me, this movie now feels like a puzzle piece that like lays the
Mm.
groundwork for something that I become like super like Redditor. Like I just like need to understand every like part of the puzzle.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Um, but I think that is like I think that is also what makes the movie so good is that it does that, but it also is just an amazing standalone. I
mhm,
mean, like I watched it again like literally 2 hours ago, like
yeah,
an hour before this call,
mm,
and it just looks amazing. This might have been the first time where I like was able to appreciate how good it looked, especially for how much you're saying it's 25-year-old movie. I
yeah,
think about 99, like special effects back then. This just feels like this must have been like the big jump, the big leap.
Hmm.
Um,
yeah, for sure.
it's insane. It's nuts. And it made me appreciate like how, it just made me think about how modern movies like Uncanny Valley and like
Yeah.
different aspects of like what we've kind of lost along the way since then. Like, okay, maybe
Yeah,
like
yeah,
oh they couldn't really show someone jump over a building, so they like show the feet. Like how
yeah,
things are
Yeah.
yeah,
framed. It's just like
yeah,
okay, it achieved its purpose. It achieves its purpose in so many ways that are just amazing.
yeah.
Um,
It feels like
I
that
appreciate it in a
perfect
lot of
balance
ways.
between film and
Right,
digital. That
right.
crossroads.
Yeah, right. And we don't have to go too far down it, but by the time you get to the third one, it almost just like looks too clean.
Hmm.
It looks this the first one I think benefits from having that kind of like early Law and Order like grungy
Yeah,
camera look,
definitely.
very dark, but it just
Hmm.
serves it so well. It makes everything feel more serious even when it's everyone's talking like an edge lord.
I need guns.
Yeah.
Lots of guns.
Lots
It's
of
so
guns.
and I also thought watching it around this time that young Keanu is so much better for this than older now
I
Keanu, and a lot of it
I
I think is
agree.
even just how much higher pitched his voice was then. Because now it
Yeah.
sounds like he's faking it, but that's just how his voice is. He's just old.
Yeah.
But the younger, higher pitched voice made like the perfect depressed Gen
Fish out
X.
of water. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You guys are both bringing up a lot of really good points, and I don't know which one I want to use to jump off to next, because there's all of the like great action set pieces. There's the casting of Keanu Reeves and how perfect that is. There's all of the stuff with the like technology and use of CGI in this movie, and like how it creates this like new visual language that is really unique to this. There's the entire series as a whole that we could get into. So I think I want to push the series as a whole until the end so we can spend a lot of time to like actually focus on this first movie itself. Um, and I feel like the use of technology, both like within the story and to tell the story, right? Like to shoot and make the movie is really interesting, because so much of the story is about the hold that big technology has over us and like had over us in 1999. And
Mhm.
obviously looking back at it from a 2024 lens, it is like a lot scarier in that technology feels like it is way more dominant over our lives now than it was then. Like it almost felt like this was like a warning signal to
yeah,
Yeah.
what could happen, and it's like it's all come true. So in its own weird way, this movie is like a prophecy about what has
right
happened
now.
as much as it was about this dude named Neo.
Yeah,
And for anyone who hasn't listened to any of the episodes that you guys have been on prior, I think it's important to note that you guys both work within coding and
Mhm.
like software development and stuff. So this is like a world that you guys live within in some kind of aspect. So I am curious to hear what you guys think about just like what it means for how scary big tech is, and how scary it was in 1999 and like how scary it is now.
yeah.
Yeah.
I actually like the dialogue, the scene between Smith and Morpheus when he's like interrogating him, and he goes over the timeline of like peak of civilization was early 21st century, and or actually this is Morpheus saying this and to Neo, and he goes we marveled at at our creation of AI, like all these things, and
Oh,
it just and
oh,
now it really
it's
it
so
kind of
good.
gave me the chills a little bit. I was like, oh man,
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is way too
definitely.
timely. This is way too
Yeah,
timely. Um, but yeah, it is a little scary. It's hard to know where AI will go. Um, I think we are lucky that there are a lot of technical pitfalls, like one being like to power the kind of AI we have now, which isn't like singularity AI. It's not like a conscious being. It's just
Mhm.
like pure programming on a very high level scale. To like power those things, there are like multi-farm field like cooling plants of that like are like it's like enough water to like power cities, like small cities of water to
yeah,
keep these like servers and computers cool enough to like allow those computations to be like occurring when you use ChatGPT. So it's like
That's awesome.
yeah, right? So
I
cool.
agree. Yeah, we
But
should use
it's
more.
like
Yeah.
those
No one
technical
cities don't need water.
pitfalls those technical pitfalls make me feel better about like us creating something that wouldn't need some kind of insane amount of power. Well, that's literally what the movie's about, right? Like
I
we
mean, the
yeah,
Yeah,
power could
it's
be
so
could be
humans.
our
weirdly
bodies, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
But
so prophetic. It's bizarre.
yeah, it's scary. But I mean, I think, we're in a place in a time where we work in coding, we're more on like the web side of it. And I think we're kind of in the space where it's more like scarier because it's like, okay, well, someone will be able to like type what we want for you to code into like, like into whatever program and it'll just spit it out.
Yeah,
That's the scarier portion right now. I'm less scared about my body being a human battery, but maybe my grandkids.
yeah, that's a fair point. Um, I think it's so interesting to watch this and feel that immense amount of prophecy that they had in predicting just the kind of the
Mhm.
way things would go. There was definitely that moment of like, oh wow, that's like it's like they're talking about all the things that we're talking about and thinking about now. Um,
Mhm.
but it's so interesting to me knowing just how the world was in the late 90s and the way people, we were there, we were kids, the way people thought about technology and about software being like a very new thing, as being like a household thing. And it was the way we were kind of like exploring ideas of what technology and software actually are, like physically. And you had stuff like this coming out that kind of like manifested software as a physical thing, the matrix, the agents, kind of like explaining to people like what software does within a computer,
Yeah.
and within a computer program. Excuse me. And it's funny because at the time there was like, it was the 90s. There was like a lot of optimism about a lot of things, I think.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, over the course of the decade. And then there was like, movies like The Matrix and Fight Club and things like that that kind of like tore down a bit of that, like, actually, the world that we're, the confines of this world are like a little weird, and kind of had that like negative imagining of what technology could do. Whereas now, I feel like we're so cynical to this stuff that it's just like it's like a less exciting dystopia, that we kind of find ourselves living in with like social media and everything, and AI, where it's like you said, Sean, it's like, oh, it's not, I'm not worried about the AI like taking my body. I'm just worried about like, I don't know, like, taking my job, or like, my kids or something like that. This kind of
Yeah, or
like,
like destroying the environment just from its like use.
yeah,
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 just
it's
to
like
make a
this
picture
just
of like Taylor Swift playing center for the Patriots or something.
With
And it's
Winnie the
like,
Pooh.
yeah,
yeah,
like, oh, we could have used that to grow crops to feed like an entire small villages, but
yeah,
instead like we get to
there
share
was,
this like dumbass, picture on the internet with our friends.
yeah. It's like the difference
Right.
between, Y2K, where there was that feeling of, oh my God, the world is actually about to like explode and like fire
Mhm.
and fall apart, versus now it's almost like that slow creeping feeling of, is any of this helping? Is any of this actually really good for us? Or it's interesting. And like 25 years of distance, just the way people think about technology
Yeah,
and software.
it's it is weird how both accurate and off it was, in that like we should be scared of big tech, but mostly because it's so dumb.
Yeah,
Where in
right.
1999 it was like, this is going to completely take over our lives, and like we're going to become slaves to the machines, which in ways
Yeah,
we are
literally.
now, but
Right.
not in a scary way, just in a like, oh my god, I cannot believe
Just the
how dumb like the uses that we found for this are.
yeah,
Why is
just kind
this
of a
like
depressing way.
yeah,
Yeah,
why is this
it's
so
It took all the
dominant in our
fun out
lives?
of it.
Yeah.
yeah, it's more like the corporations would use you as a human battery if they could. Like it's more
Yeah,
like
it
that
wouldn't even
kind
be
of
the
like
AI, it would be the
right,
companies.
I don't
right.
even know if the corporations would, because they're like too dumb to do it.
Yeah.
There is, I think, Welsh, it's interesting that you brought up Fight Club, and just like thinking about 1999 and what was at the front of people's minds and fears and anxieties at that time.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it's in this movie as explicitly as it is in Fight Club, but also just the fears of like where capitalism was heading was
Yeah.
another thing that was like big around this time. And I feel like you get aspects of that in this movie, not to the same extent that you get it within uh, Fight Club. But it is just really interesting that like 1999 will probably, and continues to go down as one of the best years in movie history. Like you look at the
Oh yeah.
roster of movies that came out that year, and it's just banger after banger after banger after banger. But it
Yeah.
also, the year itself represents this like really interesting sort of like transition time within American culture. And
Mm.
I feel like no movie represents that time better than The Matrix. So
Yeah.
I don't know how to transition from that into the next question, but let's go back to the Keanu Reeves of it all, because I feel like
That's what it
let's
always
stop
comes back
talking
to.
Shadow
about
the
like,
Hedgehog.
yeah, let's stop talking about like big ideas and fears and anxieties. Let's talk about how cool Keanu Reeves is, because the cast of
Talk
this
about
movie
our guy.
is pretty awesome, and Keanu himself
Yeah.
is awesome. I don't know if you guys knew this, but apparently he was like the fifth choice that they had for Neo. The
Oh wow.
story famously goes Will Smith was their number one choice, but he turned it down to make that movie Wild Wild West, which we all
I
Oh
love that
remember.
wow.
movie.
Oh
I
man, thank God
love
he
Wild
did.
Wild West.
Yeah.
Oh my
Okay.
Otherwise,
god.
we wouldn't have had that.
Wild
That should
Wild
be in
West
the
is
canon, if I'm
amazing,
being
and
honest.
then it's so funny how like grounded it is, and then it's just like that giant robot spider shows up at the end or whatever.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
thought
I
I
think
like
you made a good
imagined that
choice.
movie as a kid. Yeah.
Made a good choice.
I was not expecting you guys to both be like super in the pocket for Wild Wild West, but
I mean, dude, when we're
whatever.
like 10 years old and there's like that hot tub scene, are you crazy?
Yeah.
Like,
What's
obviously,
cooler?
it's gonna root ourselves in our brains.
I had a
I was
cassette
never a big
tape
Wild
of
Wild West guy.
the song Wild Wild West that I think was like split between
Wild
both
Wild
sides of the
West.
cassette. Yeah. I think I got it from like Burger King or something, and I
All
remember
right,
just
we're
running
switching,
that
we're switching
thing.
subject matters
This is
for
a
this
Wild Wild
episode.
West
We'll come back
podcast now.
to Matrix will be
Yeah.
next step.
Yeah, this is strictly Wild Wild West now. So he was the first choice, turned it down for that. I don't know if he was second or third choice, but among the other choices, Tom Cruise must have been up there, but then Leo DiCaprio was the other big one. And Leo was like, I don't want to
Interesting.
do like big green screeny CGI heavy kind of movie after doing the Titanic. And then like
Yeah.
fifth or sixth down the list, they were like, screw it, I guess we could get the dude from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And
Yeah.
he ended up
Johnny
being
Mnemonic.
the perfect dude for it. Yeah, well, Johnny Mnemonic came out a few years prior, and that movie absolutely bombed. And then when people heard like, oh, they're making another cyberpunky Keanu Reeves movie, the Wachowskis and Warner Bros. Were like kind of scared that no one would go see it, because they didn't want to see Keanu Reeves do that again. But all this to say, Keanu was the perfect choice. So, Welsh, give me all of your thoughts on our most beloved Keanu Reeves.
It's so funny watching it again this time specifically. Again, similar to Sean, like an hour before we did this, just to be super fresh on it. I feel like I really saw, I don't know, something in his performance that I had kind of missed before, of just realizing
Mhm.
like the joke is like, oh, he's like not even acting. He's not really doing anything. He just, is very deadpan and kind of saying whoa to things. But I think there's just something so wonderfully genuine in his performance. He You buy it, I think. Like right from the first time you see him on screen, you just kind of somehow know who this guy is and like how he fits in. He's just such an interesting looking guy. He's very understated. It's one of those things where hindsight is 2020, but I can't really imagine anyone else playing that part and having it work as well as it does. To such an iconic level where like you see him, you think of the movie. You see the movie, you think of him. Like it's just
Mhm.
so perfect. He just summed up that like that guy in the 90s, like working your office job at your cubicle, like, but you've got so much more and you're hoping for so much more. I don't know. There's something. I think he's doing a lot more than we gave him credit for at the time. Just probably just honestly through his own instincts, just being kind of that
Mhm.
that guy in general. I don't know how much of that was intentional, but I really like him in the part, honestly. Yeah, I was surprised to go back and be like, wait, I like him even more than I already did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like he just like the second you see him, I also had the same like realization this watch too, where it's just like the second you see him, you're just like, oh, depressed Gen X guy at his corporate job. And
Yeah.
like
Yeah, yeah,
and it's so funny because the only other person I've seen do as well, and I feel like their roles are so similar except for Neo being like a super programmer, is Ron Livingston in Office Space. Like it's almost the
Also
same character in the
1999.
beginning. What?
yeah.
Also
Also 99,
99.
right.
Yeah.
So there was
That's
definitely
funny.
like that clear message of like, what are we doing, man?
Yeah. Well,
Like
also same with
Yeah,
Edward
yeah,
Norton in Fight Club, right? That's like the holy trinity of depressed Gen
Gen
X.
Xers.
Yeah.
Actually, I haven't seen
yeah,
Fight Club. I
for
still need
sure.
to watch it.
Oh, dang.
Oh, dude,
I
yeah,
know.
You should
very
I'm
watch
very
it.
saving
much
it.
in the vein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect pairing for this movie.
Mm.
But yeah, Keanu totally embodies
Yeah,
that. And also, like, you just can't, I can't imagine anyone else giving the performance of being able to be both super awed by this entire like Matrix world and delivering that whoa line. Like, could you imagine Will Smith or Leo DiCaprio like trying to be
yeah,
as confused as Keanu Reeves is when he's like first learning about the Matrix? Like, could you imagine
yeah.
either of them saying, I know Kung Fu?
That's
Like, it just,
that's the funny thing.
right? Like his
I
Bill and
realized
Ted
I
like
like,
know
stoner
Kung
vibe.
Fu.
yeah, I was like anyone else in this part would have, and I say this in like the best intentioned way. They would have like done more. I feel like they would have
Hmm.
tried harder to just act the part rather than just
Hmm.
having that kind of genuine like, whoa, just
Yeah.
like I just rolled out of
Whoa.
here. I just woke up in a pod. Like you feel like
Yeah.
he's that guy. It's like he's been through
Yeah.
so much stuff where like someone else would have been like, oh, but like my motivation, man. Like did I have a childhood? Like I don't know if Keanu thought about all that stuff. I think he was like, I'm just a dude, like
Just a
stuck
dude.
here, just a dude.
But then Keanu also has the thing where he can do the last act of the movie where he is a super badass action hero.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Like
Yeah.
no one else has both of those sides.
Right. He goes
That's
from Ron Livingston to
for
John
sure.
Wick in over the
yeah.
course of
Yeah,
the
in
movie.
2 hours and 16 minutes.
So yeah, Keanu's perfect. I also think the rest of the cast is and casting is pretty amazing. You've
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
got Joey
phenomenal.
Pants as Cypress, who is like the perfect he's the perfect scumbag, sleazeball, traitor kind of guy. I don't think
Yep.
anyone could do Morpheus the way that Larry Fishburne did.
Oh no, not at all.
Dude,
He's
amazing. Every
I
time
felt
you just feel like he knows something about the world that you don't. Well, in this movie, he does, but like
yeah.
he
Yeah.
really sells it. Like, and even when he's just like says like "hello," like it's just like, oh shit,
Yeah.
I better shut the hell up.
The honor is all mine.
Yeah.
Jesus. I felt that especially watching this time around too, of just like how just oh what a presence, man. He's just so weird and like omniscient and like you just trust him kind of implicitly almost right away the way that Neo does in the same way of like he like just meets this guy and he's like, give me that red pill.
Yeah.
Let's go. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
right.
this guy's
And it's
so cool. Like the fashion, the weird kind of still
and I
he's
don't
almost
know if that's like intentional with the other cast, but like he clearly, even as an audience member, you're not sure if you trust Carrie Ann Moss as Trinity. You don't know if you trust
Well, she's a
what
woman.
was her name? The blonde one.
Switch.
Oh, Switch.
Switch.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know if you
Yeah.
trust Switch. But then once you see
APOC.
Morpheus, once you see Larry Fish on screen, you're just like, all right, we're in
Yeah.
good
Okay.
hands.
I'm in. Yeah.
He does the wise old sage role perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
There's
So
I don't know,
well.
there's just something that he brings to it. He said his inspiration for the performance was Darth Vader meets Yoda.
Mm.
Which
I'll buy
oh
that.
no, Obi-Wan meets Yoda with a dash of Darth Vader, which makes a lot more
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Like
I buy both.
I
yeah.
feel like the Vader is in the pacing of the way he
the
talks.
Yeah, the physical countenance for sure,
Yeah.
and just that pace.
He
Yeah.
and like most of his early scenes, it's just him explaining the Matrix, and usually exposition like that is met with severe eye rolls, but there's something about the way that he delivers it and like the way that Keanu Reeves receives it that it never feels corny or out of place. Like all of
Yeah.
those scenes where he's like, and this is our training room where we upload everything in the Matrix and you can learn how to do kung fu and stuff. Like in
This is
any
the
other
dojo.
scenario, yeah, in any other movie that reads like pure dog shit. But there's for some reason like the two actors that they have
Yeah.
performing it, and I'm sure like also within the direction and writing, it just never feels corny. You're like totally on board the
That's
whole
so
time.
true. Lawrence Fishburne is amazing at like delivering utterly ridiculous things, and Keanu Reeves is so good at receiving them
Yeah.
that they play off each other so brilliantly. You're like, oh my god, like what the hell is he talking about? But like, wait, I buy it too. Like what?
Yeah.
You know, you feel like it. Yeah, you're just so immersed in it. It's amazing.
And this is our dojo.
Yeah,
Whoa.
this is our dojo. This is where we train.
It's a good Larry Fishburne.
Yeah, I was doing some. I was almost Lance Reddick territory, but rest in peace.
R.I.P.
He could have been a good
R.I.P.
Morpheus.
Yeah,
He could
But
have.
it's
He
got
would
to be
actually.
Larry.
He would have been really good Morpheus too. He might have been the only
Yeah.
other dude who could do it.
Yeah.
yeah.
And then to round out the cast, we've got Carrie Ann Moss as Trinity and Hugo Weaving as Agent
Oh
Smith.
my god, dude,
Another
the
great
agents,
Hugo is Hugo might be
insane.
my second favorite casting in the movie. It might be like
Yeah,
Morpheus and Hugo. It's just like
yeah.
he's just so amazing at taking that bottled up psychopath who's just waiting to freaking explode.
Yeah,
And just the way he stands and the way he slightly moves the muscles in his face, just really it just makes you so uncomfortable.
you feel like he's about to explode. You know, there's just that tension. Um, that's why I think the agents are so cool and were cast so well because it's just again going back to that kind of like the encroaching cynicism of the 90s towards certain things like they're your boss, they're the feds, they're dudes in suits with slicked back hair who are just there to like make your life shit.
And how wimpy do all the other agents feel in comparison to him? And they look almost the same. But you
Mhm.
see the other ones and you're just like, whatever, yeah.
Yeah,
But then he like
it's
comes in the middle of them and you're just like, oh dear.
yeah.
Even
They
and he's like
it,
smaller than all of them, but he's still more
Yeah.
imposing.
they did
Oh,
that amazing job of just again like embodying software and like technology and what it means and just them being
right.
like, oh, they're just their software. They're
Program.
never gonna think outside the box. But
Right.
that's why you're so uncomfortable around him because you're like, oh, he's thinking something, he's feeling something. There's more going
Right.
on there.
I was just thinking we were talking about how like Lance Reddick could have been Morpheus. I think the only other person who could do Agent Smith would have been Michael Shannon.
Oh wow,
Interesting.
that would be wild. Yeah,
You could see him with those glasses on.
Yeah.
Mr.
With a
I
creepy
can't see
Anderson.
him
smile.
doing any of the action sequences though.
That's
Which
true.
is
Yeah, the most he's ever run is in oh, I was gonna say Lady in the Water, but it's not the name of the movie. What the heck's the name of that movie?
Shape of Water.
Shape of Water. There you go.
Man,
Thank you.
Man of
Love that
Steel.
movie
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Okay, so speaking of Michael Shannon not being able to do the action, that is a good way for us to talk about all of the amazing kung fu and like stunt coordination within this movie. So all of those actors, right? Keanu, Larry Fishburne, Hugo, and Carrie Ann Moss, apparently before filming started, they took a 4-month trip to Hong Kong to train with this like old school kung fu filmmaker who
Cool.
taught them like everything about how to be a kung fu action star
Wow.
because the Wachowskis really wanted all of the actors to like do all of their own stunts, and I feel like
Wow.
it pays off. I
Wow.
don't know what
So
you guys think.
everyone did their own stunts. Like all those sequences are. It's literally Keanu and Hugo Weaving. Like. Do, 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 do,
Yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah, dude, it's
That's
insane.
actually I didn't know that. That's actually insane. And I was actually thinking about that rewatching it today. Like I was like specifically thinking about like trying to see when you kind of look for like when they splice
Mhm.
in the stuntman
Yeah,
and
when a
stuff,
stunt
like
double.
especially in
Yeah.
fights,
Yeah,
like their head will be like this and they'll be like, whatever. I was trying to
yeah,
see like, oh, can I see where they swap them out? And I was like, oh, I can't really notice, but now I know why. That's
It's tough
actually
to
really
catch. Yeah.
insane.
yeah. Dude, 4 months of training before
That's
they started
that's
filming,
crazy.
like
That
every day,
I
like
feel like
7
most
a.m.
actors
to
would just
like
be like, I'm out.
yeah, and they all got injured. Like Keanu Reeves, like he almost like broke his neck or something,
Whoa,
and he was training with a neck brace. Hugo Weaving like
whoa,
broke his
Wow.
foot or something, and he was on crutches during I think during filming. So they had to like push all of his fight sequences to the end of the filming schedule. Like everyone
Wow.
was locked in for this,
In
but it
it.
pays
Yeah.
off.
So in it.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it's so grounded, like it for being so fantastical and basically kind of just being like a live action anime. It is so
Mhm.
believable. And
Mm.
for some reason, there's just something grounded about the absurd combat that they're doing. I think that's probably part of it too. Just the full commitment to it.
That's a cool way to think about it, and especially since they went ahead and like did the animatrix and stuff too. Like they probably had that in mind. Um, and knowing that also definitely makes like the like motorcycle sequence in two feel less special. Because it's just like it really makes you appreciate how much they were dedicated to it, and how
Yeah.
grounded the first one really was and managed to feel like insanely grandiose at the same time. It wasn't straight up grandiose and telling you it was. It was like presenting itself in both of those ways. It's
Yeah.
really cool.
Totally. That's a big thought that I had was just how I mean it's certainly like it does show what's the expression, like showing versus telling or whatever. Like it certainly does
Mhm.
hit us with some big stuff, but there's so much stuff
Right.
that's just kind of hinted at or dropped through a one, passing line, or you kind of imagine like seeing the world as it is, the current state of it, like everything is destroyed. You just pretty much just get that one shot of Morpheus saying, and this is the world as it is now, and it's like, the destroyed buildings and stuff, and you're like, that's all you need to see. And then
Mhm.
you kind of they do a lot with less. They're very tasteful with the CGI for like the Sentinels and the robots and stuff. Like everything is framed in a way and lit in a way that like it's just enough where it needs to be. Whereas I feel like now so many things are just like, oh, there would be like a 30-minute scene of seeing, the Sentinels like chasing and doing all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Again,
Right.
it's
Right.
that time period, that film and digital, where like just that perfect, ugh,
Yeah, it makes you
just
realize like
dripping it on there, drizzling it
you don't need a crazy Sentinel Nezer gunfight. Like it just doesn't. It's not that important. Like it.
That's
Yeah.
one thing that they were not cooking with. The Nezer Kenever is an awful name.
The Nebuchadnezzar.
I think it's
Whatever it's
biblical.
called.
I think it's
Yeah,
biblical.
I think
That
he is
doesn't
like
make it
an
any
old
better. It's
Babylonian
still kind of
king.
whack. The Nizzle Badizzle. Like they got they got Snoop Dogg in the writing room for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
He just
Um
drops it so casually too. He's like, "And this is my ship, the Nebuchadnezzar," and you're like,
yeah.
"What? Sorry, what?
Excuse me, sir.
Could you run
Are you
run that back?
are you okay, Morpheus? Um, yeah, dude. So, okay, going back to Welsh, what you said about the anime inspirations, I feel like it's
Mhm.
very obvious that this movie is inspired by both like old school 70s, 80s kung fu movies, but then also Japanese anime. Do you guys
Mhm.
like were you catching that? Like, what did you feel like that vibe of like all of the different sort of inspirations from different genres and modes of storytelling? Also, like bringing in biblical stuff. Like, it is very much so a Jesus story. Neo is a Jesus
Yeah,
figure, and like you have
very much
that
a
with
Messiah.
like, hey, let's. What if Jesus did kung fu against robots, and and also it was anime? Like, that's insane.
Yeah, I think that's why the movie still feels so fresh. Is that it took so many different things, so many disparate forces and inspirations, and put them together in like a shockingly cohesive way. Like it should not work as well as it does.
Hmm.
Like going from a very heavy kind of dystopian messiah story to the again, yeah, like literally doing slow motion kung fu, jumping in the air. Like that's the first. Well, it's like almost the first shot in the movie is Carrie Ann Moss, like slow
Yeah.
mo kicking a cop in the chest, and you're like, what the hell is going on? You buy it so immediately. Um, that really stuck out to me this time was just the hype, that kind of hype of combat that you see in a lot of like old school kind of Hong Kong combat stuff, gunfights, a lot of that anime powering up kind of thing. The two, the hero and the villain looking at each other and cracking their knuckles and then, like turbo
Yeah.
punching. I'd have to look back at like what was actually kind of out at the time because
Hmm.
it feels so like Dragon Ball inspired, so like Akira inspired, like all these sorts of things, and I wonder how much of that actually came into it versus me
I
being
never
like, oh,
watched it,
it's like anime.
Welsh. I never watched it, but it reminds me a lot of the vibe of like Ghost in the Shell.
Mm, totally.
Yeah, like and not the ScarJo remake, not the ScarJo remake.
the, the
The original Ghost in the Shell
the
anime
the
has like the
live action.
same cyberkinetic punk vibe, and I think it
Yeah,
might have a very similar thing to do with like plugging in, getting jacked into the, like a different world.
yeah,
Learning
for
kung
sure.
fu. This does seem like I would have to look, but this feels like it's got to be one of, if not the earliest example of a live action movie really trying to like lend itself to the visual language of anime or
Mm.
cartoons
Yeah,
or
I
something
agree
like that. I think
for sure.
the Wachowskis originally wrote this as a comic book series, which makes sense. Like they were originally writing what ended up being the first three movies, like the trilogy. They were writing that as a comic book, and then someone was like, "Oh, you guys should turn this into a movie." And they were like, "Okay, cool," and took it to Warner Bros. And they were like, "You should pare this down a little bit." So
Yeah.
from there, like the first movie was going to be like the entire story, and they sort of like
Oh
brought it
wow.
down to just this, but it very much
Yeah.
so reads like I can't think of another example of a live action movie that is trying to like mimic the vibe of an anime or something. Like this feels like the
Space
first of
Jam.
many. Oh shit. All right. All
It all
roads lead
comes
back
back.
to Space Jam. Yeah.
Wow, that's insane. So they were writing it as a comic book.
Yeah.
If they did that, the whole story in one movie, it would have went down as the maybe the worst movie of all time.
Yeah. It would have been terrible.
It would have been so bad. Um, wow, that's so interesting. I had no idea. Wow, this movie has a lot of good behind the scenes tidbits.
Yeah. Dude,
Yeah.
I spent hours watching the DVD special
DVD stuff.
features of this. Yeah.
That's
Just
incredible.
just nonstop. And all of this stuff is in it. Um but yeah, the comic book stuff and like they were just like, yeah, we want to make a live action comic book movie. And this is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you had Blade before this, but
Hmm.
you had a
Yeah.
couple Batman movies, but those didn't really mimic the like actual
Right.
aesthetic of comic books the
Yeah.
way that this movie does.
That's so
Yeah.
true. I mean, in a lot of ways, this does feel like kind of like a superhero movie in a lot of ways,
Hmm.
like that sense of I mean, especially like at the end, it's like he's literally a superhero.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
When he
kind of
takes
feel that.
flight.
Yeah, just flies up into the air.
To,
That was, oh my god, when I was a kid, dude. The soundtrack, come on.
Love Rage.
Awesome.
It's pretty insane that they ended the movie with "Wake Up"
With
by
Wake Up.
Rage Against the Machine. That's like
Keanu Reeves flying
a
into the
little
camera.
too on the nose, but it still works.
I'm just glad we got one Zach De La Rocha.
Wake Up.
Wake Up.
Rage Against the Machine.
Machine,
That's
yeah.
literally the entire movie. It is about a guy who wakes up to rage against machines.
They didn't write it for this movie, right? Because around
No,
the
it
same
was out
time they wrote that
before.
song for Godzilla.
Yeah.
It's just
Which is terrible.
That's crazy, yeah.
Oh,
I
no,
think
they're
the song
deserving.
was out, and the Wachowskis were just like, yes.
Perfect. Bingo.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's the one.
It's a bingo.
Alt title: Wake Up, Neo from the Matrix. in parentheses, wake up, in parentheses, Neo, you're in the Matrix.
Neo, please wake up from the Matrix so that you can rage against the machine that is the Matrix.
Publication date 1996.
Yeah.
Funny that you joke about the wake up Neo part. Like, it's such a small part of the movie, but I find that beginning section of him kind of like in his weird nerd den, like at his computer, and like the people come to the door and buying stuff and asking him to come party. Like, for some reason, that is a very outsized portion of the movie in my head. I think it's such an interesting kind of vibe of like the '90s, that kind of punkish, with that style of music, that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of why the movie stands the test of time, is because like there's almost like two movies. There's the sci-fi, and then there is this kind of just like grungy '90s vibe, and I love that. Part of me is almost like, I just want to watch a whole movie about Tom Anderson, hacker extraordinaire, and like going through his weird nerd life. I just love that vibe. Something about that.
Yeah, I was like vigorously Googling, like, what did he sell at the beginning of the movie?
Like the little disc.
He's like almost like a drug dealer, but it's like for like programming,
like cracks and software, hacked software.
And it's just he's just selling it to these like people who are like going to this club. I'm like, what is he selling?
And like their names, I had the subtitles on. He's like, yeah, like, Narubia, like, should we take him with us or whatever? And you're like, who are these people? It's so interesting.
And then I would love anyone out there who listens, if they were in New York or in a big city in the late 90s, if there were like heavy techno clubs like that. Like, I'm so curious to know, like, because it was such a specific vibe, and I was too young to know if that was like actually a thing. And
would you dub that industrial techno? Because that's what I want to call it, but I don't know if that's a thing.
It's like, I was calling it like metal techno in my head, but I think industrial is a better term.
Yeah.
It's almost like what 9 Inch Nails ended up doing, like, but techno.
It's such a, like, if 9 Inch Nails, when they were still doing 9 Inch Nails stuff, if they made the Challengers soundtrack, but like in 1999, like that would be it would sound like
in that club. That was
that club
too, right? Didn't he do Challengers?
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Is that song that's playing at the club, is that Rob Zombie?
Yeah.
Rob Zombie music.
Absolute banger of a song.
I just want to know if clubs like that existed. It was such a specific vibe.
I feel like they must have. Is that like the Chemical Brothers? Is that like, are they in that vein, or is that something totally different? Like, we need someone to tell us.
Our generation's version of that club party was the house party in Cloverfield. It was just like Kings Leon and the Strokes.
Yeah. So much lamer than whatever was going on here. What do you guys think of the style of this movie? Like the wardrobing aesthetic with the kind of weird sunglasses, the all black leather kind of vibe, like Trinity's black leather pants and stuff. Are you guys down with that, or do you think it's? We have a friend who is very much so still dressing towards that aesthetic.
Yeah.
But you guys know.
I love it, man. There's something it's that time, man. Like it created that sense of, I don't know, like just so instantly cool and weird, kind of like the disparate, like, Morpheus is wearing like purple pants and like a green polka dotted tie, and like this kind of absurdity. It's almost like the way people, when they enter the Matrix, kind of just see themselves, almost in an unexpected way. It's like you wonder how
Oh,
you'd be dressed, if you jacked in, that kind of
yeah.
film. Um, yeah, it's almost
Something.
like, dressing yourself in the dark with like
It
really cool stuff.
it very much feels like it. They were trying to go for like a like making us envision ones and zeros going like all over their bodies, and then like when it like
Yeah,
fades off, it's just like that's what's left is like
Mhm.
yeah,
all of
like
like the leather and like the black.
Yeah,
Um,
the
and
black and green aesthetic very much so like mimicking the, you know,
digital,
the digital computer coding sort of vibe, or
yeah,
like how we thought of computers and like software programming up to that point, like within that color
yeah,
uh palette or whatever, like very much so mimics that. Yeah.
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 I think it's really difficult, like each generation, to like nail the concept of just like what would be the coolest shit right now. I think
Yeah.
most times people try to do that and they like swing and miss, but
Mhm.
Yeah,
they like I think for 99 everyone was like kind of thinking that way.
yeah,
Y2K was floating in the air. I think they just like nailed what would be the coolest thing for right in this specific moment in time. And
Yeah.
totally.
it ages really well. It's still cool as hell.
Yeah,
This movie
there's
is
that
so
feeling of
insanely.
yeah, like video game characters in a way. Just who are you if you can just be like the coolest version of yourself, like, logging into something and just like, I don't know. I think that's why it just feels so cool in that way.
So something kind of interesting in that regard. When they all go into the Matrix and they have their super cool get-ups and stuff, you'll notice Switch is the only character in all white.
And wait, yeah.
I did
And
notice that, yeah.
apparently, in the original script, Switch was going to be someone who is a woman in the real world or a man in the real world and then goes into the Matrix and is a
Mm.
woman. And
Yeah.
knowing the history that we know of the Wachowski sisters and like everything that they've gone through, um,
Hmm.
I feel like this movie is in many ways like their subconscious mind telling them like, yo, you're trans, and like them not
Yeah,
knowing
yeah,
how to how to like process it. So they were like, oh, what if we just make this movie about a world where you can like go in and like be this really cool
Whoever.
fully realized superhero version of yourself, to the point where they even like wrote in a stand-in character who still has the name Switch
Which,
and
yeah.
Switch,
still
yeah,
like is the only one in all white, very much so standing out from the
yeah,
rest
yeah.
of the crew when they go into the Matrix. But it is like, and this sort of circles back to Welsh what you were saying before, where there's so much within this movie that is like very much so laid out to us, but there is also a
Hmm.
lot that's just like hinted to. And
Yeah,
I think because of that, like the movie, which any good movie should do, it like opens itself up to a ton of different readings of like what it could
mm,
be about, as opposed to like what it is just like explicitly about within the confines of the 2 hours that we're watching it.
yeah,
And like that to me has always been a pretty interesting kind of like aspect of something that's like hovering over the back of the movie.
totally. Yeah, I think there's definitely that sense of like when you become aware of something, whether it's, a social injustice, it's something about yourself, it's something about the world that you can't unlearn, you can't unknow
Hmm.
it. And I think there's a lot of that theme of just kind of like waking up to a truth that is unpleasant, that, Morpheus asks Neo, like, even if we could put you back in, would you want to? And he's like, you don't really have an answer for that. Which that really stuck out to me this time, of like, just, yeah, waking up to like who you are, how the world really is, and being like, oh shit, man, like things are so much easier before I was aware of any of this stuff. That
Well,
kind of
that's the whole thing with
waking
the
up process.
Cypress character, which to me
Oh,
on this
Cipher.
rewatch, Cypher, what did I call him? Cypress?
I like
Like like the
Cypress. Ooh.
the island off of off of Turkey.
Yeah, off of Greece.
um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, Cypher, he like that's his whole thing is just like, I don't want to know about any of this stuff. Like ignorance is very much so bliss. I
Yeah.
know that this steak is not real, but I would much rather just like live my life thinking the lie that this steak is delicious and juicy, and
Yeah.
that's all I want. I don't want to know any of these awful truths about the world. I just want to go through life with my blinders on, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and it's like, is it even, if you can feel it, if you can taste it, if you can smell it, is it real? You know,
Hmm.
it's like, when does real, what
Yeah,
makes
what
something
is
real?
reality?
If your brain is telling you it's real and you can sense it's real, is it real?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that trips me up all the time. Not to get too intense, but just the way that we all experience the world is like going to be very different, and like the way that I taste salty is going to be different from the ways that you guys taste salty. But we all like
Yeah,
understand it
yeah.
to be salty, even though like our truths and realities could be completely different. Like we could all be living in these different
Exactly.
simulations, but like
Yeah, yeah.
we know it to be
There's no
real. So
way. There's no way for me to know that your blue is my blue.
yeah,
We
Yeah.
just understand what blue is. You know what I mean? But
that
there's,
messes
Yeah.
me up like 3 times a week. I'll
it's
think about
crazy.
that.
Yeah.
Like
It's
other people see blue differently than I see blue, but we all know it to be blue.
yeah.
That's crazy.
Relativity, man. It's insane. It's really insane.
So then is this movie kind of like a myth in that we could somehow unplug and like everything can become some sort of truth of like ones and zeros in a matrix form, or like is the movie like lying to us in that regard?
I kind of took it more as like, I took the movie more as like the metaphor of the illusion of like choice and perception, more than like more than like more than we're like in a simulation, and sorry, less of that we're like in a simulation, but more of that perception. I don't, I kind of lost what I was gonna say. Just
Mhm.
more that like, it's less that we're in a simulation, but more that choice and perception like could be an illusion. You know, especially the choice. Like, there's no
Yeah,
way for you
yeah.
to know that you actually have free choice or free will. That's the thing that like, that's the heaviest thing I took away from the movie. That's the heaviest thing I took away from
Yeah.
the whole trilogy, which I think was their big overarching
Hmm.
thing. I think there's like a few big things, and I think one of them people usually latch into the most, whether it's an allegory for being transsexual, an allegory for Jesus Christ,
Hmm.
um, or an allegory for the illusion of choice. And the one that
Hmm.
I walk away with the most is the concept of choice and perception. Um,
Yeah.
because because every turn in this movie and in the full trilogy, every time you think you hit the end of the road with, okay, they actually have free will now. The Wachowskis go, actually that was programmed too. You know, like
Actually. Yeah.
every road, even to the point where they get into like the real world stuff. So it really trips you up, and I it's cool to know that they were writing this as a comic book first, because that makes so much more sense as to why the trilogy, in my opinion, was so well storyboarded.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, and the first movie is obviously the first step of that. Like, when you watch this first movie now, you can see those pieces fall in line of what they were
Hmm.
thinking with this overarching theme of like, do you have choice? Do you have free will? Um, and so that to me is the big one that sticks with me. It's just, where does free will start and stop, and the same with
Hmm.
choice. And it really, that's what sends me down the rabbit hole, because I just want to know like everything about every little thing they put in this movie, and all three. It just feels so deliberate.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It is really deliberate storytelling. So then, what do you like to you? Is the scene with the Oracle the most interesting, where she's like kind of giving Neo what he wants to slash needs to hear in order to make the choices that he
Yeah.
needs to make in order to like live out the
Mhm.
prophecy
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
whatever ways he's supposed to, like
That's,
that.
oh my God.
Yeah,
Messes
that's
with
really
it's
you. I
messing
think
me
she
up.
says it herself. She's like, what's really going to mess with you is, would you have knocked over the vase if I didn't say anything? it's like, oh my
Didn't you say mess with
God.
your noodle?
Yeah, this will really cook your noodle or something like that.
Yeah, I love that scene, and the like a big part of that scene too is why are there like 8 prospects here? You know, it's
Yeah, what are all
it
those kids doing there? Yeah.
right, and that's kind of dug into and stuff. But I think in the moment of that movie, it makes you think of like it makes you doubt. You know, it makes you doubt is Neo the actually the one? No, it seems like
Hmm.
no one's actually sure about like anything that seems so confident up until that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so it and again, it ends up being incredibly deliberate, which is
Yeah.
cool. So those story points, I just like sink my teeth in them, and I have to like look into every part of like almost every scene because it's so deliberate.
So, like, do you think those other kids were there not because they were also ones or like potential, messiahs or whatever, but because Neo needed a little bit of the self doubt
Mm.
to like eventually get him over the edge, and also so one of them could tell him that there is no spoon,
No,
which
I
is one of
think
my
they
favorite
actually,
Yeah.
lines.
I think they actually potentially were ones. I, I,
Interesting.
I think they actually potentially were ones, and I think the whole concept of the one again, going back to like false prophecy and stuff, it's very Dune in the way that it's like the Bene Gesserit were essentially just like stacking their cards by planting
Hmm.
prophecies everywhere and like having babies with every society to eventually get the Hishwat Keterak or whatever,
Kusatz,
right?
Haderach, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like that's essentially what the Oracle was doing. She
Hmm.
was
Yeah.
trying to like get her
He's
own.
planting seeds everywhere.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think they actually were prospects. I don't think that was like a thing, and I think the prophecy was kind of false. But I think it goes back to like there was a general everything had been programmed. That whole choice was like there really is no
Mm.
choice, and we're just stacking our deck
Hmm.
against that so that we can come out on top.
I have a question, but I don't want to get too much into the rest of the series. So
Yeah, we can
we're gonna
we
have to
can
talk.
write it down. We'll loop back.
We're gonna have to talk about it later. But just like I have like so many questions for like my own personal interest. Um, so Neo within this movie does eventually end up becoming the one and has like a sick standoff with Agent Smith towards the end. The
Yeah.
What do you guys make of the moment where he dies and he does the Jesus thing and is brought back to life by the love of the Holy Trinity? And
Oh, dude.
oh, dude, so like
Oh.
that's why this movie is awesome, because it has like that moment that is like super on the nose biblically, but then like in the next scene or the next shot, it's when he sees the world in code and he like
Hmm.
flexes and takes a big inhale, and like the whole
And
room
the
does it
world
with him.
bends.
Oh, that
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
that
so
that part was
cool.
so
Oh my
cool. I
gosh.
actually love. I wonder if that was just like done with the computer or what, but it was like it was so impactful
Yeah.
because like
Yeah.
because you'd almost feel like that moment where he sees the world, that he sees the one, literally sees the ones and zeros.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
like you're like, oh, he's like awake. But then when that happens, it's not like they put that moment of him being awake, and then they put this moment of like, oh, also he's gonna fuck you all up. Like,
Yeah.
like, yeah, the way that just bended around him, it
It's
was
this weird
so
moment
cool.
of like him becoming one with the thing that he like has
He's
to destroy, and like
yeah,
the only way that he
Yeah.
could, you know, eviscerate it from the world or whatever is by becoming like fully entwined with it. In
right.
Yeah.
We just did Harry Potter a couple weeks ago, so like that's kind of top of mind. But it's like the same idea that like Harry and Voldemort are like two halves of the same coin or whatever, and like they have a lot of each
Mhm.
other within them.
Right.
So like Neo then has to like have the Matrix within him in order to defeat it.
Yeah, right. I think that part, I think like the kiss bringing him back, I think it does. I think it serves like two purposes. I think the baseline purpose, and I think it's something that works for like general audiences is like
Mhm.
Power of Love, right? Like Power
Yeah.
of
Of
Love
course.
brings them back. That's like that's something that will like always be a winner. And it
Yeah.
wins me over in like games, movies today. Like I'll Power of Friendship, Power of Love. I'm like, let's ride, let's go. But like, but I think like the secondary level of that, like the secondary purpose of that is that I think that kiss is the moment that his brain was able to separate the real world from the Matrix world. And I
Hmm.
think once he was able to do that is when like it goes back actually to that scene with the Oracle where that little kid is telling him, don't try to bend the spoon, try to convince yourself that the spoon isn't there. The
No,
kiss.
dude, there is no spoon.
Oh, there is no spoon. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There
Come on,
is no
dude.
spoon. The
Get it
kiss
right.
is the yeah, so my bad. The kiss essentially was the like there is no spoon moment for him, where he was able to now like be like
There is no death. Yeah.
I live right, there is no death. I didn't die. It
This
wasn't
is none
Yeah.
of
real.
this is real.
So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's essentially what the kiss did. It was like a fracture moment for him where he was able to be like there was no death, there is no spoon, like there's no world. So I can just do whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This, it's just, God, it's so cool. There's so much stuff that really resonated with me more now is just knowing more about technology through just through work and through life, and just knowing a bit more about just religion, spirituality. This is such an interesting mix of like Christianity and also like some Buddhism, some Hinduism,
Hmm.
like senses of like cycles of rebirth and suffering, and that's like a whole the whole thing that Agent Smith says is like, this only works because human beings function when there is suffering, there is injustice, there is this, like, you're addicted to it, you can't get enough of it, like, and it's just a big part of like like his moment of it's almost like it's funny because I think Keanu Reeves did also play the Buddha in a movie at one point. I think he was in like a Siddhartha adaptation, I can't remember, but it's almost like the Buddha under the Bodhi tree achieving nirvana and like a sense of knowing the state of the world as it is, and like, oh, okay, like this deep understanding of that. And it's cool to see that represented in like a crazy sci-fi kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like, oh, things are the way they are, and like if I accept it, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm a lot happier. Yeah,
That's
it's
really
it's so
cool.
interesting.
I have read and seen that there was inspiration from like Zen Buddhism, but because I'm not familiar with it myself and it's just like not something that gets recycled in a lot of Western stories, like I
Yeah,
don't know that a lot of us caught on to that. Whereas the Neo, Morpheus, and Trinity serving as like, or I guess it would be Morpheus, Neo, and Trinity serving as Father, Son, Holy Spirit from like Christianity and whatnot is like extremely apparent to me. But the whole
yeah,
idea as Neo being a stand-in also for like a Buddha type figure is
yeah,
definitely something that seems like it was super deliberate, but not something that is extremely apparent to Western audiences, which is another really cool thing that this movie does. Like, right with the kung fu, kung flu. Shout out Trump.
Kung Trump. The Matrix is the
I don't
Kung
know,
Flu
like
virus,
the years.
folks.
It's coming for us. It's got every Agent Smith. He's coming for everyone. He's gonna
Agent
get you.
Smith is the Kung Flu virus, folks. You see him
Everyone knows
flying
he's
through
the
the
baddest
air.
agent. Yeah.
Punch right through the wall,
Um.
folks.
So yeah, between the kung fu, the anime, and everything, like this movie is mixing a lot of Eastern and Western sort of influences into one, which like again just goes back to this movie is layering so many different ideas onto one another, and like nothing ever feels lost within that,
Mhm.
even though they're all like fighting for the same space. Like it's not like a commentary on gun violence, but there is a whole lot of gun violence within the movie that like looks super cool as like action
Yeah,
set pieces, but it's also about like the downfall of civilization because of our reliance on technology. And it's like, how does all this stuff
yeah,
exist within the same movie frame to frame?
Yeah.
It's wild.
You almost went from Trump to Kamala. Exist in the context before you and all that came
Yeah.
since then.
Did this movie fall out of a coconut tree, or does it
Yeah.
exist within the context?
Neo fell out of a coconut tree.
Whoa.
Neo, this is loco. That's my new favorite. That's my new favorite line from the movie.
Neo, this is loco.
Yeah.
It's such a random line.
So funny.
That stuck out to me too for some reason too. I was just like, wait a minute. Why does he know Spanish? Yeah, it's just one of those
Yeah,
things
why
of
does
like,
Spanish exist? Oh, I guess it would stay around in the
Dude, they
simulated world.
uploaded Kung Fu into his brain. They can upload
Spanish.
one Spanish word.
Oh, I hate Spanish.
It's not. He doesn't even say a full sentence in Spanish. He just says, "This is loco."
Neo, this is loco.
What do you guys make of Bullet Time? Bullet Time's pretty crazy.
so cool, man.
The best. Bullet time is specifically when he does the roof thing.
Yeah, it's the roof, but they also use it to refer to like the Trinity kick at the beginning and a few other things.
Yeah, there's a couple of those just impactful moments of someone doing a really sick freaking thing where like the camera whips around and
yeah, well, it's wild that like bullet time now is just like used at weddings in those like 360 things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like it was so we keep talking about it, but you know, this is felt like
so fresh.
The peak of when film met special effects. And that I think is like the perfect example.
Yeah.
It's just like it's so cool. It's like it's not too uncanny to where your brain like even really is like firing off telling you it's like super fake looking or anything. It just looks awesome. It just looks super cool.
Yeah, I think the movie does such a good job of showing like impact and the lead up to impact. I think it does such a good job of that.
It's a great point.
And just if you could bend reality to your will, like that kind of just jumping and throwing a fist like this, it gives you goosebumps because you're like, that is just it's the kind of thing you see in you read in comic books, you see in games, and it's like, what if someone could actually bend reality to just do that in real life? It's such a cool concept.
But it's really weird because this movie is able to show all of that, but in a way that almost feels like tangible for us as audience members, where when you see it in a comic book or you see it while you're playing a video game, it feels very foreign. And the way that CGI technology has kind of progressed in 2024 movies, it also feels that same level of foreign. But here, like when Neo does that sick jump, kick, punch thing, where you like see that it's Keanu Reeves and you're just like, oh yeah, that's just like him on wires. But like that still feels way more accessible than, Doctor Strange moving his reality around in whatever ways that he's doing it. It is a really like, it seems like in 1999 we were able to strike the perfect balance, like you guys are saying, of live action and CGI special
movie did
effects.
For live action combat what I think like Jurassic Park did for like like animals in a way, of that kind of like the practical effect being so good that you're like, yeah, that's a dude jumping 10 feet in the air and throwing a punch, like I buy it. That's a velociraptor chasing those kids in the cafeteria, I buy it. And then like you go any further than that and it's like, okay, no,
and then we bring in the CGI to just like take us like right over that hump instead of
a little squeak.
and you crash into the valley.
I really hope what you're saying is spot on, and I think like it really feels like it's one of those things where you read in a comic book panel and then you're like, oh, this looks so cool on the big screen, but like this is what people really mean when they say that, not like, sorry for any Marvel listeners, not like the like Deadpool Wolverine where you have for some reason fully CGI Hugh Jackman just standing there breathing. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like we've come so far in the overuse of it that it's like
Yeah.
it really for me like it just really it takes me out of it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it
I
really
agree.
takes me out of it when this is like it really sucks you in. And
Well, here it's all
I hope we get back to more. I think the next director to do something like almost really faithful in the style, something like this, I think it'll be really successful because I don't think we've really had anything that has tried to tone it down that much. The closest like Marvel like huge movie I can think of is like certain scenes in Shang-Chi, and people like
Mm.
lauded over those scenes.
yeah. You just have a
And
guy fighting on a bus.
yeah, or
Yeah.
even the opening scene
Well,
where it's like clearly a mix of some CGI, but like it's a lot of fly wire, and it looks
Mhm.
awesome. It looks so good, and everyone, it feels like a piece of art. I hope we get more return to practical. Alien Romulus had a lot of that. That everyone's loving that movie. They did like fully
Nice.
animatronic xenomorphs and face huggers, and it looks amazing. It just keeps you
So
in it because
cool.
it's something real and tangible your brain can perceive. Like it
Yeah.
makes it
Yeah.
so much more enticing.
I mean, it's so funny. That is like what they talk about in the movie too, where it's like the brain can tell when something isn't
Yes, it
right.
rejects it.
Like it rejects it. It makes it real or it rejects it. And it's funny that we're like, but like the movie makes you feel that way too.
Yeah. That is interesting. It's just I think this movie is seen as a classic because it is impeccably well made in many, if not all regards. But it also, for what it's about and when it came out and the technology that was like available to it, it's all just this. The timing could not have been any more perfect for what people were thinking about, what technology was available to the filmmakers to like create the vision that they wanted to create, and then like
Yeah.
what the movie itself was about. Um, like I don't think any movie has ever come out at a more perfect time for what it was than The Matrix in the spring of 1999.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I actually really agree with that. Like Y2K around the corner, just the grunge, the growing cynicism with the world being built on, a lot of crappy things that when you're aware of it, you can't help but think about it. It's like technology. Oh, oh, so good.
Yeah,
Wouldn't have worked in 1990. Wouldn't have worked in 2010. Got to be right
yeah,
here.
it was perfect. Um, cool. Anything? Oh well, actually, before we move on to recommendations and such, because this movie does exist within the context of a larger franchise, um, the franchise that like seems to kind of split people. Me
Yeah,
personally, I have not seen anything beyond this first movie and the fourth movie, Resurrections, which I really enjoyed. I haven't seen the other two, so
yeah,
before before we move on and stop talking about the Matrix, I just wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on the series as a whole. I feel like Mr. Banana Man
yeah,
has a lot of thoughts here, so we'll let him
Yeah.
go first.
I mean I actually like it's one of those things where it's like so dense that like I only rewatched all of it like 3 years ago for Resurrections, and when you told us like we were gonna do this, I realized I completely like forgot all of it because it's it's so dense. It
a
goes
lot
so deep.
happens. Yeah,
It, and it's really I find it really interesting. Um, I I think again like it's so deliberate and they do a lot of good job. They do a very good job of like covering any like plot hole with that deliberateness. But I
Hmm.
think what suffers at that point is like you remove a lot of like wonder, you remove a lot of like um it becomes like metachlorines, right? It's like do people like
Yeah.
yeah.
need that?
That's a great
I see.
comparison.
I'm the kind of person where I actually like that concept. I think it's kind of cool and interesting.
Hmm.
Um, but like, but I think for most people, it like ruins the spectacle and the wonder of it. And I think there's a lot of that in this. But watching this again as a standalone, you really see how early on they were set to like plant the do the groundwork for what was to come. Even when he's like planting that bug on him and it turns into like that gross little squid bug cockroach
The
thing,
body horror.
Yeah.
like um you it's just like telling with context of 2, 3, and 4 of just like that there is like like a monolith monoculture amongst like the machines and like everything kind of looks the same and like everything looks like these giant squid monster alien machines.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing how they were able to like tie in this whole real world plot across this like digital world plot and like bring those two together in this like cool way of um having this prophecy, and it's like false prophecy, and it's like the programs there's like rogue programs and they're trying to like break the cycle. I know you said you haven't seen 2 and 3, but like you going down this like crazy thing where you keep hitting these walls like I said earlier where oh, okay, well, now we're at free choice. Okay, now we're at free choice. And it's just like, nope, nope, nope. There's a whole part where Neo like it goes to pretty much like end the Matrix and comes across the architect of the Matrix, which is a program, and the architect essentially tells him that like this has happened like 6 times prior, you know,
Yeah.
and
Oh
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
and like
They let it
those
happen.
it's just every time you think you're like finally at that point of like choice,
Mhm.
Wachowski's just like, nah, you're not.
Nah, you're not.
Um,
There never is any. Yeah.
and it's I love it's like so enticing to me. And I think that level of storyboarding, and if even if you don't love it, and it is a little too like midichlorian for you, I think
Mhm.
being able to storyboard something like that from the onset and have those kind of big ideas in mind, um, is like really borderline impossible. Like I think they're kind of like geniuses, if I'm being honest, for being able to like
Yeah.
string all this together in a relatively coherent way, even if it goes off the rails a little bit towards the end. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm like in awe of like the ability. Like I can't even like write like a story paragraph,
Yeah.
and they wrote like a whole two world scenario with like insane metaphors crisscrossing between the two in and out constantly.
Yeah.
And like character development on top of that, and like like all these things. So I love it, and I love digging into what they built. Um,
Mhm.
and they are doing Matrix 5. I don't think the Wachowskis are directing, or I don't
Both of
think
them?
Lana
Oh,
Wachowski's directing it. I think she's executive producing it. I
okay.
think
Mm.
maybe it's at a point where that's good. I think
Yeah.
it'll be cool to see a different director with a Wachowski as like an advisor, because I do think their big ideas and like what they have in mind for that world are really what make it special and feel like you want to just keep reading about it and like diving
Yeah.
into what it is. Um,
Yeah.
so if that's preserved, but it's maybe told in a way that has like a different pacing or like focuses on like maybe something smaller, like smaller in moment to moment, but keeps playing into something larger. I think that could be like
Mhm.
really, really cool. So I think this franchise deserves like more and more. You were saying earlier, like comic books. I would actually love a comic book, like even if it's like a
Yeah.
retelling. And I think this level of story could even do like I think it could even be told way better in like a 100 volume comic book, And I think it could be really
Yeah.
good,
I agree
like
with that.
really, really like a dark
Yeah.
horse comic, like really gritty, really sad.
Yeah.
Because the movies are very sad, but I think a lot of that is lost in like how edgy and cool it is.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I think it's very hard. I think it's easier to kind of blend those things in like a paper medium.
Interesting. Okay, Welsh, before I go to you, on that
Yeah.
happy sad thing, do you guys think that this movie, in the way that it's wrapped up, is like a hopeful ending? Do you think it is kind of sad and cynical still? Where would you fall
This
on
the
that?
first movie.
This first one, yeah.
Yeah.
I think if they never made another one, I would say it's hopeful.
Okay.
It
Uh,
feels like
I would
Superman was
agree.
born.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's like,
and there's no stopping
who
him.
even knows what the solution is, but it's like now someone is capable of trying. Someone's going to do
Yeah.
something. There's no, there's no the one not being there anymore, kind of introducing that rogue element. So yeah, I would say it ends on a pretty, and he flies at the camera while Rage Against the Machine plays. That's sick as hell. So how do you not feel good?
All right. So, Welsh, what are your thoughts on the series as a whole?
Man, do I always feel so conflicted about it. I think I kind of have to think of it in my head as The Matrix, the movie, the
Mm-hmm.
first one, and then very separately, I kind of think of The Matrix as a concept and as a franchise. I think I have to do that for my own sanity to really be able to appreciate the first one, which I love for so many reasons. Because it's tough. It's like I know I can't be like, well, I don't think it's really canon. Only the first one exists because it's all canon. That's how it is.
Yeah.
But I like the first one so much as a standalone with so much like Sean, you were saying, just the mystery of a lot of things, things that are hinted at, things that aren't super gone into detail. Like you can really fill in the blanks in so many ways. I love the first one. I actually like the second and third a bit more than I used to. I rewatched them a couple of years ago, and I was a bit more charitable to them.
That's what happened to me
I
too.
just, yeah, I think my problem with the sequels, and I think personal opinion, I think they've gotten worse as they've gone on, which is why like I actually I don't want them to make another one. But I think for me, it's the kind of way where like you look at George Lucas for all his ups and downs as a Star Wars and as a creator versus Disney Star Wars, where it's like he was making who knows what. He was making his own thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
now they're making a Star Wars movie. I feel like the Matrix movies, as they went on, lost a bit of that. Like now they're making like, oh, it's a Matrix movie. We're making another Matrix. Whereas like the first one, it's like there was, who knows what any of that was. There was that kind of like earnestness and grungy, cyberpunky kind of thing to it that I think is just so cool. Um, I think the second movie does a good job of that as well for the most part, and then like the third on, it's like it just kind of starts to get a little bit almost just commenting on itself, certain things to add drama to it, or I don't know. I feel like it just lost a bit of that really honest edge that the first movie has, where it's like they were just doing what they thought was really cool, and then not needing to explain too much stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I go back and forth on it. I think the performances are. I think there's really cool stuff in all of them. I just don't think
Mm-hmm.
that 2, 3, or 4 are in any way as just tight a package as the first one is. It's like it's just
Yeah.
so.
It's
Oh,
hard to
it's perfect.
recapture, what happens in the first one. This is like,
Yeah,
it might be a perfect movie. Like it might be, we typically
yeah,
on the show, we don't give out, star ratings or anything, but like this might be a 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
yeah,
And even if like the other ones are
yeah,
like, 3.5, 4, which is, I would say is pretty good. Like it's still hard when you're aiming for the levels
yeah,
that they were able to reach
Hmm.
in this first one. And some of
yeah,
that might have just been like the novelty of it. Like you said, no one had ever heard of the Matrix. We had no preconceived notions about like what the Matrix should be or can be or anything like that. Whereas like, by the time
yeah,
4 comes around, we've all been sitting with this movie for 20 plus years. So
yeah.
we all
And now
have our own
we
thoughts and
know
we're all like, yeah, we're bringing
what it
our own
is.
stuff to it, like our own baggage and
Yeah,
whatnot, and like what it should be and what it needs to be for us. Where like we didn't have
yeah,
that with the first one. It's like even watching it now, you're like, wow, this is so fresh and
yeah.
cool and
I
new
I
to
had a
me.
thought while rewatching this, like you try to put yourself in the shoes and in the seat of an audience member in 1999, seeing it for the first time.
Yeah,
It's
that's what I
like
was thinking.
seeing the Empire Strikes Back, and like the big reveals and stuff that happen there. Like I'm just thinking like that moment where uh, Keanu Reeves wakes up in he's shaved, he's
Oh,
naked, he's in this tube. Oh no, Rage Against the Machine starts playing.
Right, where
Um,
they confirm
you know,
you're not in
he
the real world. Yeah.
yeah, and you're like, wait a minute, that the horror, the absolute like body
Yeah.
horror of that is just even I know that's coming, but I was just like, oh my god, like what is
Yeah.
happening? Like how that probably just shook the hell out of people seeing that for the first time. Like this
Yeah,
is
and I
real.
I was doing the
It's
same
all
thing
real.
where I was like trying to think about what if I was watching this in '99, no, like, I hadn't seen the trailer. Like, I just kinda went into the movie and, like,
Yeah, yeah,
you're like, "Oh, does she have superpowers? Like, how is she jumping so high?" And, like, "Oh, like, things seem, like, a little off," like, just, like, the lead up to, like, everything. It must have been so mind-blowing to not be 7 years old and having no idea what
Yeah.
was going on. But, like, to be, like, a, 15-year-old up, like, and just, like, kinda, like, slowly creeping in you, and then, like you said, all of a sudden, you're just like, boom, like, human batteries, like, wires and holes in their bodies, and just like, "What the hell is
yeah.
going on?" Like, it must
And
have been
the
mind-blowing,
horror
and
of it.
yeah, it is so cool. It's so cool.
Yeah, dude, you walk out of this movie in 1999, you're like 20, you and your friends maybe like smoked a joint beforehand, and you leave and you're like,
I gotta buy a trench
so
coat.
you're like, one, I gotta buy a trench coat. Two, is everything that we like that we thought that we knew was true and real, is that all false? Also, like, how can we learn kung fu? And you're just like you're just like in the lobby of a movie theater, and all of those things are going through your mind, and there are like dozens of people pouring out, and they're all saying the same exact thing. Like, that must have been absolutely nuts. And I mean, not to be too, grandpa yelling at clouds, but like, do we have stuff like this anymore where we're all like totally wowed and like our minds are blown collectively in a really cool, interesting way where, you know,
Yeah,
I think the Wachowski said going into this, there are a lot of movies with big ideas, and there are a lot of big action movies that come out, but you never see a big action movie with big ideas. Why
Mm,
not? And they were
right.
like, let's
yeah,
just
it's so true.
let's
Go
make
for it.
that. Let's be the people who bring that into the world. And they
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
completely
And
just like knocked it out of the park.
we've seen, like, swings at it, right? Like, Prometheus, that's 13 years later, almost only a
Mhm.
little over a decade later. Um, that flopped. Like, it did so bad, and people are so torn over it. But, like,
yeah,
so I think it speaks like, it's a testament to how difficult it is
Yeah.
to make something that is a mega success with huge ideas.
Like
Because
Tenet's
yeah.
maybe like the
Tenet
biggest swing that
and
we've
I
seen
think,
since.
I would say actually, I think Dune 2, the second Dune is a big
Yeah.
movie with big ideas.
Yeah.
And
But
I
that's
think
based off of something, not like
oh, yeah, that's
two
true.
people who are just like, yeah, what if there was
Doing
this
it
guy named
themselves.
Neo? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that case, yeah, Inception. Um, what was,
Yeah. It's really just Nolan-y stuff,
yeah,
right?
Nolan
Like
stuff,
all the
yeah.
big Marvel movies, which are like, I love the first Avengers movie, but the idea there is like, what if Thor and Captain America were in the same movie?
Right, right. I'm always angry.
Yeah. What if the Hulk was always angry? That's the big idea. And the Wachowskis are like, what if this prophet was a false prophet? And also, he actually lived in computer code.
Yeah, I can't think of another, like, original big idea, big blockbuster.
It's got to just
Um,
be the Nolan stuff.
yeah, the Nolan stuff. Yeah, really just the Nolan stuff.
It's insane. This movie, The Matrix, stands alone, in my opinion.
Yeah,
There's a lot of stuff that has come before it that, like, maybe like Star Wars mixed a bunch of different ideas in a similar way. Blade Runner was like big cyberpunky kind of movie. Terminator,
Yeah,
like threat of AI, but like this movie just it puts all of that stuff together and just like spits out this insanely unique, singular, incredible film.
yeah.
So
yeah.
Um, yeah, I will also say I do think Prometheus falls in line in that category, but it just wasn't successful. It was a big schism for a
yeah,
lot of people. Inception,
yeah,
everybody
Yeah.
loved.
yeah.
Everybody loved. I have a question though. Do we think is it fair to say the Wachowskis are the Weezer of movies? Came out first project, 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, and then subsequent just never quite like almost the same tone, but never quite
Yeah,
lived up to the
Yeah.
first thing we got from them.
that's interesting. I don't know if there are any Weezer albums that I really like besides the first one,
Exactly.
but there are Wachowski movies that I
That you
like.
kind of like.
I loved
Mm.
Matrix Resurrections or Resurrection, whatever it's called. I thought that movie was great. Their Speed Racer is
Oh, that was
incredible.
them. They did Speed Racer.
Yeah, their
Oh
Speed
yeah.
Racer is
Oh,
awesome.
I need to watch
But
that. I saw. I
is that
actually
like
got a tweet about it last night.
their Green album? Is that their
Yeah, it
Hurley?
must be Beverly Hills.
Yeah,
The red album.
yeah. Pork and Beans.
Pork and Beans in Beverly Hills. Yeah,
Yeah, that album sucks.
but it's got 2 big hits. That's kind of like
Yeah,
Speed Racer's. Like,
but Speed Racer is like a reclaimed sort of movie. Like everyone hated it when it first came out,
and
and
now
it's
it's
only been like
getting
the
love.
last like 4 years that people are like,
Oh,
oh yeah,
I
Speed
get what they were
Racer.
doing.
pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it's really
Pretty,
just
pretty, pretty good.
it's an updated version of this where they're like, okay, let's take the visual language of a cartoon, anime, comic book kind of medium and translate that to
Yeah.
film. And I just don't think audiences were ready for it in the way that that presents itself in 08, the way that they were in 99 with The Matrix.
Yeah.
But
It's a good way of
yeah,
putting it.
they might very well might be the Weezer of filmmaking. Although they had a movie before this, but this was the
Yeah, I
big
was
one.
looking that up. Called Bound. It had Joe Pantoliano in it again. They couldn't get enough of him.
Joey
I think a
Pants.
couple other Joey Pants. Whatever happened to him, man? He was on one in the 90s.
He's got a new identity. It's called Bill Burr. He reminds me so much of Bill Burr.
Oh yeah, I
He
do forget
reminds me
that they're
so
not the
much of
same
Bill Burr.
guy. That
Dude,
is
Bill
two people.
Burr.
I
I
don't
always forget.
believe it.
If the Matrix were made
It'd
for
be
the
Bill
first
Burr.
time in
You be Bill
2020,
Burr. That's
Oh my god, yeah, Bill Burr would be Cypher. He'd be Cypress.
my boy Cypress. Cypress Bill.
My brain tells me this steak is juicy, delicious.
Purpose.
Ignorance is bliss.
That's all right. We're starting to lose our minds a little bit, so let's do some recommendations and call it a day. So, just in case we have any new listeners who might be tuning in for the first time to this episode, I'll quickly run through the rules for recommendations. But essentially, for each movie that we introduce into the canon, we also recommend 3 things per co-host guest to check out if you like said movie. Of those 3 recommendations, at least one of them has to be another movie. The other 2, however, can be any and everything else. It can be a book, a video game, a Weezer album, another album from a band that's not Weezer, a comic book, a board game, really any and everything. The connections to the movie can be as loose or on the nose as we like. And for any other movies that are recommended, they can't be movies within the canon. So no Terminator, no Blade Runner, no Star Wars, but pretty much everything else is fair game. So with all that being said, we will go around the room, give a quick intro, reasoning for why we're recommending what we're recommending, and then pass it off to the next person. So I think we can go Welsh, Banana, Raff, and then take it from there. So Welsh,
Cool.
your first recommendation.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. It's like I said, I feel like with The Matrix, there's really there's like two movies there. You know, one is the cyberpunky, the tech aspect of it, and the other is that kind of just cynical, 90s grungy kind of thing of like, raging against whatever you got going on. Whether that's
The
your
machine.
boss, that's
You don't want to say
the
it.
machine, that's your boss, the technology, that kind of thing. So it's funny when I think of this movie, I think of weirdly disparate things that aren't like sci-fi, but I still kind of consider to be the same thing. I guess my movie would be. I know it's an commonly made like comparison. I don't know if it's in the canon. Fight Club, honestly.
It is, but a good pick.
Yeah. Because for me, that is just that same kind of sense of like,
Yeah,
just realizing that, you hate the banality of life and
yeah,
kind of fighting against that.
Well, I can give you one of
I
mine.
get most sure. What do you got?
It's more related to the illusion of choice, but one of them I wrote down like four. The one of them was I put
Yeah.
Shutter Island.
Ooh, interesting.
Ooh, that
Yeah.
is interesting. I was gonna say Office Space because that is also
Oh,
in its
Yeah,
own
that would
that's
way
like
be
my top 10.
it's the same
yeah.
kind
I feel
of fighting
yeah.
against the
I feel like
banality
in
of
some
like
ways that
whatever.
even
Yeah.
yeah, that works even more because that really nails that almost surreal feeling of like, eh, is this real? Is this all there is, or is there something
Yeah.
beyond, you know, this necktie and this corporate hell that I'm stuck in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he
Most of my other
breaks, but he just doesn't get any superpowers. He just like mentally
yeah, it's
breaks.
like yeah, it's like if Neo just like got arrested by those people and then went back to
He's like,
work and
all
just,
right,
you know, lost his mind.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
No, I didn't do it.
my two my two other recommendations are video games, which is definitely
Hell
more of
yeah.
like the science fiction kind of thing, which is more kind of what jumps to mind for me when I think of this, because it's, you know, the tech stuff. One is a game called Observer, which came out a couple of years ago. It really nails that the cyberpunky dystopian kind of thing. You are playing as Rutger Hauer, actually, rest in peace. He's the main character in it. Uh, Works for a police department that is capable of basically jacking into people's brains and seeing their memories to try and solve crimes.
Hell yeah.
And it has that sense of like,
Surveillance state.
yeah, surveillance state, big time. The sense of like people kind of hiding themselves in, you know, a digital world, and kind of like visualizing what it means to actually like go inside a piece of software and an operating system, and like how the brain might do that and how it might perceive it and accept reality. It
Hmm.
has a lot of that kind of the how, even though like it's horrible, there's still that part of you that's like, man, like I don't know, maybe that unpleasant lie is better than the, you know, the truth. um, the other one is another game called Soma. It's has to do with like, what's a good way of putting it, similar to the way the brain accepts an artificial reality, and kind of, yeah, it's a horror game, but it definitely has that, it's a similar kind of sense of just, I guess I'm thinking of the digital world being represented in a physical way. I feel like that's something
Hmm.
that I love about this movie, that
Yeah.
that appeals to me so much.
Hell yeah. I like
Yeah.
that. Good
Yeah.
picks. Good
Nice.
picks. I dig it. All right, Banana, you're up.
Um, yeah, I wrote down a couple movies. I think probably the like one that I would say most. It's tough because I feel like you enjoy this movie for different reasons. You love it for like the big ideas, or you love it for
Hmm.
the action,
Hmm.
um, or like the if you're like in the combo realm, I would say Inception. Did you do Inception?
Inception's in the canon.
Okay, Inception's in the canon. Is Memento in the canon?
I think Memento's in the canon. The Screen Age Wasteland writers love Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, right. Well, we're basic. I'm basic, so
Yeah.
I wrote Inception, Memento, Shutter Island, and Dune, or like the Dune movies.
Yeah.
And I think Shutter Island is really cool because I mentioned it before, but it's like deals eventually kind of comes around with that illusion of choice thing, which I won't say
Yeah.
too much more, but because that if you haven't seen it, it's like you really want to go in blind.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually haven't ever rewatched it, just clips.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll do that because it is a pretty. I don't know if another movie takes such a jarring turn.
Mm.
I really like that connection that you're making. And that movie is also kind of like good for like pre spooky season vibes,
Yeah,
where it's
right.
like not
Yeah.
totally a horror movie, but it's like kind of
Something's
like
going
on
on,
the edge of like thriller area there. I
and
like that.
you're sitting there the whole time like something's off here.
Yeah. The
Something's a little
vibes
off.
are not
Not
great.
good. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I also love detective stories, and most of it plays as a detective story. So I love that. And the reason I put Dune was because I realized watching and thinking about the movie the trilogy this time around. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if they took a lot of inspo from Dune. There's a lot of parallels. The way, like,
Hmm.
again, false prophecies are planted. Um, like, basically, again, like illusion of choice, right? Like, it
Yeah.
kind of makes you feel like um like Neo's an anomaly, right? Paul was an anomaly in the Bene Gesserit plan.
Hmm.
He was like the one blip that wasn't supposed to happen, because Lady Jessica's choice. But like for the most part, like the way that things are planted around different societies to move in one direction for something specific to happen. And so you know, you go deeper into the Matrix trilogy, you find out like the one was has happened recurringly over and over. So I think there's a lot of cool parallels there. And so I think, if you like those kind of big ideas that carry through movie to movie, I think the Dune trilogy is definitely doing that really well.
Yeah.
Um, and then one game I was thinking about this game more from the action side, but it's the only game. It's actually a trilogy. It's the Max Payne trilogy, mostly from like
Mm.
the action standpoint, because and specifically for me, I would say Max Payne 3 is like a all-time must-play game. It it's a like brooding tragedy, over the top tragedy, like so over the top where it's like has an underlying level of like like funny. But it's like it was made by Rockstar, who obviously made Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, but it was published by them, but it was made by Remedy, who is become like the most creative developers out there in mainstream gaming. Mind bending concepts, like they take everything and like traditional things and like really twist them on their heads. And in Max Payne, they take combat and they pretty much introduce bullet time into it. And it's like kind of like it's a very unique feeling game in that way, where you can just kind of like you're just like, you know, you have all these people you have to like fight or whatever, but like you're just like like slow mo. It's so fun. So I would say if you're interested in a game that plays like how the Matrix watches, I would say Max Payne 3. It's super
Yeah,
fun.
it's a good comparison.
Hell yeah. Good picks. I like it. Except for Shutter Island. It sucked. I don't know why I said that. Awesome.
Shout out Leo.
So shout out Leo, who was almost Neo, which still would not have worked.
Is Neo.
Would not have been the vibes. So for my recommendations, I'm gonna do a book, an album, and a movie. For the book, it's super on the nose, but there's this book called Best Movie Year Ever by Brian Raftery. It's kind of just going through the history of 1999 in film, and it talks about all of the movies that came out that year. So, like we were talking about before, the roster of movies from 1999 is absolutely insane. You've got The Matrix, you've got Fight Club, Blair Witch Project, you've
Mm,
got Magnolia, Eyes Wide Shut, American
damn.
Beauty, Office Space, the first Star Wars prequel movie. Like the list just goes on and on. It was an absolutely insane year. And it's pretty much just this guy, this writer, is talking about how 1999 like really represents this like interesting shift within the film industry, but also has like all these amazing movies that are, you know, kind of timeless classics. And really just going into like the history of all of that and how it all sort of came to be. So if you're into film history, you know, Hollywood industry kind of reads, Best Movie Year Ever is great to check
Oh,
out.
cool.
The album that I'm recommending is one that's kind of a guilty pleasure. But like I love this artist and we spoke about it, but the movie ends with Wake Up by Rage Against the Machine. So you take 3/4 of Rage Against the Machine and then you replace Zach De La Rocha with Chris Cornell and you get Audio Slave.
Audio Slave.
And the first Audio Slave album is like it's kind of a guilty pleasure. It's like kind of embarrassing, but
Yeah.
I will spin that all the time. I love that album.
I mean, Coach
Like,
Ice is a top 25, top 100 all timer.
yeah, it's a banger.
So great.
Plus, Michael Mann loves to use Audio Slave in his movies,
Oh hell yeah,
so
that's
they got to
hilarious.
be
That's
they got to
so
be pretty big.
specific.
It's super random. Like, he's the only director who has in multiple movies had a needle drop of an Audio Slave song, and every time I'm like, hell yeah.
Dude,
So that's that's my
that's
album.
amazing. That's awesome.
I love it. Yeah, I can't. I try to deny it so much, but I can't deny it. I am like Audio Slave #1 fan. And then the movie that I'm going to recommend, I was between two. One that sort of has a similar vibe of that opening or like early scene where they go to the nightclub. Those like that like late 90s industrial techno sort of vibe that we were talking about. So I was either going to recommend a movie that had that or just a movie that to me feels like a great kung fu movie. I think I'm going to go with the first one because, I can recommend kung fu movies anytime. Well, is that true? You know what? I usually don't allow it. I usually don't allow 4 recommendations, but it's my podcast, so I can do whatever the hell I want. I'm going to recommend both. The first one, the one that has a nightclub scene, late 90s, great superhero movie, Blade.
Oh cool.
Nice.
I need to watch the Blade movies actually.
Different vibes. The Matrix nightclub scene doesn't have an awesome like action set piece with it, but that's fine. And then because this movie was inspired so much by Hong Kong kung fu movies, I wanted to give a shout out to one of my favorite kung fu movies that I feel like is a good place to start if you're someone who like wants to get into the genre, because it is really cool to just like throw on a movie where people are flying around on wires and doing all sorts of crazy stunt coordination. So the kung fu movie that I'm going to recommend is called Clan of the White Lotus. It's a pretty standard story about like a dude who needs to learn a new kung fu technique so that he can defeat his like old master, and it's pretty sick. I don't know that this movie like is essentially one that the Wachowskis cited as a inspiration for the Matrix, but it might be, and it's a pretty cool movie if you want to get into the genre. So
It might be. It might be.
it's maybe
It's pretty good.
I think that's a callback only for the 3 of us because I don't think we were recording
Oh,
when
we
that joke
didn't
first
record the Larry
came
David
up.
stuff.
Well, Sean's, this has
And
been.
can I add a movie? Can I fix my movie recommendation to a much better one?
Do it.
I actually remembered I was going to talk about this one and then I choked and forgot about it in the moment. Should have written it down. Totally unrelated to any of the sci-fi stuff, but about it's a movie I saw recently. I saw the TV Glow. I think it came out in
Oh,
2023.
yeah.
Very, very. I actually felt that while watching The Matrix again here, the sense of you're being forced to wake up to an identity or some truth to who you are into the world, that is very uncomfortable. And it's kind of like, as this movie can be seen as an analogy for the Wachowskis transitioning. I saw the TV Glow is about, a teenager who's kind of like, his sense of reality is very confused all of a sudden. It's like, was I in this TV show that I watched with a friend? And it's sort of an analogy of like who you really are. And like,
Yeah.
it's basically if Neo had experienced all of this stuff, but took the blue pill and didn't go any further and then lived the rest of his life. And then basically like when he's an old man, screams because he's like, I never knew who I was. I never knew what the truth was. And I saw the TV Glow has a powerful moment like that of like you tearing yourself open to be like, I've been living a lie. There's something else inside of me. There's some truth to the world that I
That's
didn't
awesome.
see or that someone tried to show me. Yeah.
I've heard great
movie.
things about that movie. I've been
Yeah,
meaning
really,
to
really, really
check it out for a while. Sweet.
Yeah. In the way that The Matrix is very much about a lot of eggs getting cracked. It's definitely a movie about egg cracking. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Love cracking
Pretty
eggs.
Cool. Yeah. Recommend it.
Let's go. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure of a conversation. Always a blast having you guys on. I hope we can do it again soon. I think before we say final goodbyes, because we didn't get a chance to do it on the front end, we will on the back end allow you guys to plug where folks can find you on the internet, interact with you, and talk about probably more video game stuff than movie stuff, but still talk talk media and such. So yeah, where can our folks connect with y'all?
You can find me at No Banana Suits all across the web. I haven't streamed in a bit, but I think I'm getting back to it soon. And then we have our podcast is outdated now, but we do talk about getting it back on board. So watch this space. Maybe we'll get back to it, and that's at S
Oh,
Rank Pod.
hell
Watch
yeah.
this space.
Watch out, trailer coming soon.
Yeah, you can find me on S Rank Pod as well. Hopefully that's we'd love to bring it back. That's games, tech, all that kind of thing. But you can also find me on Instagram and Threads, the hot new social media network.
Nice.
Sean Welsh Brown, that's my full name. I'm not really particularly active, but I'm on there. So
Sweet. Well, I hope the show comes back because it was very enjoyable. Whenever I got around to listening to it, I liked your guys' end of year ranking list, even though I knew like 3 of the games that were on it.
game of
But
the
Yeah, that
year,
was fun.
baby.
yeah,
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
that was a ton of fun. And even hopefully it's coming back soon, but I think most of our listeners would enjoy it. So definitely go back and listen to some of the older episodes that are sitting out there, because they are super enjoyable, and these guys are very fun and smart and engaging to listen to. So as you can tell
Thank you.
from the conversation we had here, they they brought their A game. Hell yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was great.
Yeah,
Of
dude,
course.
always a blast.
Fantastic movie.
I'll take any opportunity to talk about the Matrix for
5 out of 5.
Always a blast, always a pleasure. I also had a ton of fun on this episode. We got another episode coming next week, of course, because we bring you hot shit week after week. So next week we're going to be talking next week we're going to be talking Casablanca. Very different vibes
Oh, I
from
actually
The
have seen
Matrix,
Casablanca.
but another amazing movie. So obviously you can find that episode wherever it is that you're listening to this episode currently, any of your podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Play, all that good stuff. We're on YouTube now. You might be watching us on YouTube. If you are, leave a comment. Let us know what you thought about The Matrix and all the stuff that we got right or wrong. You can also check us out on the website proper, ScreenAgeWasteland.com. All new episodes of the Canon are released there as well for your listening and or viewing pleasure. You can drop comments there. Tell us what you think about the show or the movie of the week. And we'll be back next week, like I said, with Casablanca. Should be very fun. And in the meantime, we will, as always, see all of you lovely folks in the wasteland.